I'm married to my wife, Sarah. We've been married for 3 years now and have been together for 6. Sarah and I first met in New York, where we both worked in the same office. She was smart, funny, and kind, and I couldn't help but fall in love with her. We dated for a few years before I proposed to her during a sunset walk in Central Park. She said yes, and our life together felt like a dream. We had a strong bond and always supported each other, even when life got tough. Like any couple, we had arguments, but always worked through them. At least, that's what I thought. My brother Ryan, 29, lives on the other side of the country in California. He's been there for years, ever since he started college at UCLA. After graduation, he got a great job in Los Angeles and decided to stay there. Ryan and I have always been close. Growing up, we were irreparable. He's the kind of guy who lights up every room he enters, and people love being around him. Even though we didn't see each other often because of the distance, we stayed in touch through calls and texts. He always came home to visit during the holidays or for big family events. 2 months ago, Ryan told me he was coming back to New York for a week to celebrate our parents' 30th wedding anniversary. Sarah and I were also planning to attend. It was a big event, and our whole family was excited. Sarah even helped plan some of the decorations for the party. Everything seemed normal at first, but then something changed. A week before Ryan arrived, Sarah had to go on a work trip to Los Angeles. She told me she was going to be busy with meetings and wouldn't have much free time. I didn't think much of it until she came back. When she returned, something felt different. She seemed distant, like her mind was somewhere else. She wasn't her usual cheerful self, and she started picking fights over small things. One evening, I bought the wrong kind of coffee creamer, and she got upset, saying I never paid attention to what she liked. I apologized and offered to get the one she wanted, but she just waved it off and said I didn't care about her at all. Her behavior confused me, but I didn't want to argue, so I let it go. Over the next few days, Sarah became more secretive. She would laugh while texting someone, but when I asked what was so funny, she'd quickly hide her phone and say it was just work stuff. I tried not to overthink it, but a part of me felt uneasy. I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. When the day of the anniversary party arrived, Sarah and I drove to my parents' house. On the way there, we agreed to act happy and cheerful for the sake of the celebration. We didn't want anyone to know that we had been arguing. When we got to the house, my mom greeted us with hugs and smiles. The house was beautifully decorated, and everyone was in a festive mood. I had to leave shortly after arriving to pick up Ryan from the airport. His flight landed at 1 p.m., and my parents' house was about an hour away from JFK. I left Sarah at the house and drove to the airport. When I saw Ryan waiting for me at the arrivals gate, he looked happy to see me, but there was something in his eyes that I couldn't quite place. On the drive back, we talked about everything: work, family, and life in general. When I mentioned Sarah, Ryan grew quiet for a moment before changing the subject. I found it strange, but I didn't press him about it. The week went by quickly. The anniversary party was a success, and everyone had a great time. Sarah and I continued to act like everything was fine, but at night we argued in whispers so no one would hear us. I started to suspect that Sarah had cheated on me during her trip to Los Angeles, but I had no proof. I didn't know who it could have been with, and I wasn't ready to confront her without knowing the truth. On the day Ryan was supposed to fly back to California, I offered to drive him to the airport. We left early in the morning to avoid traffic. Halfway to the airport, Ryan asked me to pull over. He said there was something he needed to tell me, and he couldn't wait any longer. My heart started racing as I parked the car on the side of the road. Ryan took a deep breath and said, "I made a mistake, and I need to be honest with you. During Sarah's trip to Los Angeles, she and I slept together. I felt like the ground had been pulled out from under me. My brother and my wife had betrayed me. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I wanted to yell, to scream, to punch something, but I forced myself to stay calm. I needed to hear the whole story. Ryan said it was a one-time thing and that he regretted it immediately. He said he didn't know how to tell me and that he had been carrying the guilt ever since. He apologized over and over, saying it was the biggest mistake of his life. I didn't say a word. I just stared at him, trying to process what he had done. Finally, I told him to get out of my car and find his way to the airport. I didn't want to see his face anymore. He tried to apologize again, but I cut him off and told him he was dead to me. I drove straight to my best friend's apartment. When he opened the door, he could tell something was wrong. I told him everything and he let me stay the night. I texted my mum to let her know I wouldn't be coming back to the house that evening. Meanwhile, my phone kept buzzing with messages from Sarah. She must have found out that I knew the truth because her texts ranged from, "Where are you?" to, "Please come home. I need to talk to you." I couldn't deal with her right then, so I turned off my phone. Now I'm sitting here, trying to figure out what to do next. My marriage is in shambles, and my relationship with my brother is destroyed. Do I confront Sarah? Do I file for divorce? I feel lost and betrayed, and I don't know how to move forward. If you've ever been in a situation like this, what would you do? The divorce was not easy, but it felt like the only choice I had after everything that had happened. Sarah and I sat across from each other in the lawyer's office, avoiding eye contact, the silence between us heavy with regret and anger. As the papers were signed, I couldn't help but remember all the good times we had shared, the love we once had, now reduced to cold signatures on paper. I wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. When it was over, Sarah walked out without a word, and I stayed behind for a moment, staring at the empty chair where she had been. That chapter of my life had officially ended, but the pain of betrayal and the emptiness it left behind stayed with me. After the divorce, life became a series of difficult days. Sarah and I tried to move on in our separate ways, but it wasn't as easy as we both had hoped. 3 months passed, and just as I was beginning to find some peace, Sarah reached out to me with news that would shatter any sense of normalcy I had. She was pregnant, and the baby was mine. The world seemed to stop spinning when she told me. I didn't know how to react. Anger, confusion, sadness, and a strange sense of responsibility all crashed over me at once. She told me she wasn't asking for anything, just letting me know. That was it. She said she wanted to raise the child alone because she didn't think I would want to be involved after everything that had happened. I didn't reply right away. I just stared at the message on my phone, rereading it again and again. Sarah's life didn't get any easier after she told me about the pregnancy. The people around her didn't forget what she had done. Everywhere she went, she felt the cold stares of judgment. Former friends distanced themselves, whispering behind her back. At work, she overheard colleagues talking about her, their voices dripping with disdain. Even in the grocery store, she caught sideways glances from strangers who seemed to know her story. The town we lived in wasn't very big, and gossip traveled fast. Sarah carried all this on her shoulders while trying to prepare for motherhood. She went to doctor's appointments alone, bought baby clothes and supplies by herself, and spent sleepless nights worrying about what kind of future her child would have. For me, the news of the pregnancy had thrown me into a storm of emotions. I couldn't focus on anything. At work, I made mistakes that I never used to make. At night, I couldn't sleep. I thought about the child growing inside Sarah, my child, and what kind of father I could be. But every time I thought about stepping in, I remembered what she had done, and the anger would flare up again. It wasn't just Sarah I was angry with. My brother was still in the picture, still walking around as if nothing had happened. He tried to apologize a few times, but his words felt hollow. I couldn't look at him without remembering the betrayal. The tension between us kept building. Every time we saw each other, there was an argument. It didn't matter where we were or who was around. We couldn't be in the same room without fighting. My parents tried to mediate, asking me to forgive him, saying that holding on to the anger wasn't healthy. But I couldn't let it go. Forgiveness felt impossible. The arguments got worse with each encounter, until one day everything boiled over. It was a sunny afternoon when it happened. I had gone to my parents' house to drop something off, not knowing that my brother was there. The moment I saw him, the anger bubbled to the surface. He looked at me, trying to avoid eye contact, but I wasn't about to let him off the hook. I started shouting, and he shouted back. Words flew like daggers, cutting deeper with each exchange. He accused me of being unable to move on, and I accused him of destroying my life. I don't even remember what pushed me over the edge, but suddenly I lost control. I grabbed him by the shirt and shoved him against the wall. He fought back, and before I knew it, we were in a full-blown fight. It all happened so fast. I picked up a heavy object, I don't even remember what it was, and swung it. The moment it connected, everything went silent. My brother crumpled to the floor, blood pooling around him. I stood there, frozen, staring at what I had done. My parents were screaming, but their voices sounded far away, like they were coming from underwater. I dropped the object and backed away, my hands trembling. The police arrived soon after. I didn't resist when they arrested me. There was no point. I had done it. I had let my anger consume me, and now I would have to face the consequences. The trial was quick. There was no defense I could offer that would justify what I had done. The judge sentenced me to 25 years in prison, and just like that, my life as I knew it was over. The prison was a harsh, unforgiving place. The days were long and the nights were longer. I spent most of my time thinking about what had led me here, replaying the events over and over in my mind. I thought about Sarah and the baby, wondering how they were doing. I thought about my parents, who had lost one son and now had another locked away. The guilt was suffocating. I wrote letters to Sarah, apologizing for everything, but she never replied. Outside, Sarah's life wasn't any easier. Being a single mother was hard enough, but being a single mother with a reputation like hers was almost unbearable. People whispered about her everywhere she went. When she went to the park with the baby, other mothers would pull their children away. When she went to the store, cashiers barely made eye contact. She felt like an outcast, a pariah. But through it all, she tried to stay strong for her child. She poured all her love and energy into being the best mother she could be, determined to give her child a better life than she had. Years passed, and the pain didn't go away, but it became easier to live with. In prison, I started attending therapy sessions, trying to understand my actions and come to terms with what I had done. I learned to control my anger and to let go of the resentment that had consumed me for so long. I even started helping other inmates, teaching them skills that I had learned before all this happened. It didn't erase what I had done, but it gave me a sense of purpose. Sarah, too, found small moments of happiness in her life. Her child grew up strong and healthy, a bright spot in her otherwise difficult life. She found a new job in a different town where no one knew her story, and slowly she started to rebuild her life. In the end, our lives were forever changed by the choices we had made. The pain, the regret, and the loss were things we would carry with us forever. But we both found ways to keep moving forward, even if the scars of the past never fully healed. And through it all, the lessons we learned shaped us into who we were meant to be. The child grew up in an environment filled with unanswered questions and whispers. As Sarah raised her son, Ethan, she often found herself staring into his bright eyes, which reminded her so much of James. The weight of their past hung heavily over her, but she was determined to give Ethan a life where he could thrive. Yet the world outside wasn't kind. Ethan struggled in school, not because he lacked intelligence, but because of the cruel remarks and judgment he often faced. The other children would whisper about his father being in prison, their words finding their way to him, no matter how much Sarah tried to protect him. Ethan began to notice the tension in his home, the lack of mention of his father, and the awkward silence when the family was discussed. One day, when he was old enough to piece together some of the truth, he confronted Sarah. "Mom, why don't I have a dad like everyone else?" he asked, his voice trembling. Sarah felt her heart break into pieces. She sat him down and explained in the simplest terms that his father had made a mistake and was paying for it. Ethan cried that night, not understanding why his father couldn't just come home. As Ethan grew older, his curiosity about James only deepened. Despite the pain it caused her, Sarah decided to show Ethan a photograph of his father. It was an old picture of James holding Sarah in his arms, smiling as if the world was perfect. Ethan stared at it for hours, memorizing every detail of the man he'd never met. He began asking Sarah if he could visit James in prison. At first, Sarah was hesitant, unsure if it was the right decision, but Ethan's persistence wore her down. Meanwhile, James's life in prison was a journey of transformation. At first, he had struggled with anger, regret, and isolation. He spent many nights replaying the events that had led him there, consumed by guilt over his actions. But with time, he realized he had a choice. He could let the prison walls define him, or he could work to become a better person. He started attending therapy sessions, reading books on self-improvement, and even participating in programs to mentor younger inmates. Slowly, he began to find a sense of purpose. The day Sarah and Ethan finally visited him was a moment James had dreamed about but never thought would come. When Ethan walked into the visiting room, James felt an overwhelming wave of emotions. He was nervous, unsure if his son would accept him. But as soon as Ethan saw him, he ran into James's arms. James held him tightly, tears streaming down his face. "I'm sorry," James whispered over and over again. The visits became more regular, and a fragile bridge began to form between father and son. James shared stories of his life, teaching Ethan about choices and consequences, hoping his own mistakes would serve as lessons for his son. Sarah, on the other hand, struggled with the continued judgment of society. People still whispered about her in the grocery store, at parent-teacher meetings, and even at church. Some accused her of being a bad mother for letting Ethan visit his father. Despite the pain, she held her head high, focusing on building a life for her son. She took on a job as a teacher, using her own experiences to inspire children to make better choices. After serving his time, James was finally released. Walking out of those prison gates was bittersweet. He was free, but he knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. Society wasn't ready to welcome him back with open arms. Job interviews ended quickly once employers learned about his past, and old friends kept their distance. But James was determined to rebuild his life. He took on small, odd jobs and eventually found work at a community center helping troubled youth. The reunion with Sarah and Ethan outside the prison walls was filled with mixed emotions. Sarah was cautious, unsure if James could truly be the father Ethan needed. Ethan, however, was overjoyed to have his dad back. The three of them began to navigate their new reality, slowly learning how to coexist as a fractured but healing family. James worked tirelessly to prove himself. He attended counseling sessions with Sarah to address their past and understand each other's pain. He volunteered in the community, speaking about the dangers of anger and impulsive decisions. Slowly, the judgmental whispers began to fade, replaced by nods of respect from those who had seen his transformation. Ethan grew into a confident young man, proud of the strength he saw in both his parents. When he graduated high school, James and Sarah stood side by side, cheering him on. It wasn't a perfect picture, but it was a testament to the power of redemption, forgiveness, and resilience. In time, Sarah found it in her heart to forgive James, not because she had to, but because it was the only way to truly move forward. She realized that holding on to anger only kept her trapped in the past. Forgiveness didn't erase the pain, but it allowed her to find peace. James continued to rebuild his life, proving that a person's past doesn't have to define their future. Sarah, too, became a voice for change, advocating for second chances and sharing her story to help others overcome judgment and rebuild their lives. Their journey wasn't easy, but it was a powerful reminder that even in the darkest moments, there is always a chance for light to break through. Together they showed the world that no mistake is beyond redemption and no heart is beyond healing. And that's the story of pain, redemption, and the power of forgiveness. Life isn't perfect, and neither are we. But even in the darkest times, there's hope for change, healing, and new beginnings. Thank you for listening, and remember, every story has a lesson. If you enjoyed this journey, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Learn English through novel stories for more meaningful tales. See you in the next story.